about now? Sorry. All right, thank you. Appreciate the hand signals, Dr. Burns.
She's logging in right now.
It is.
I'm sure you're pumped. I'm sure you're pumped.
It's not working, it says.
We can hear you. Stephanie, can you hear us? Ms. Crable?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. It was saying that I'm sorry, it was saying that my audio wasn't working and I had everything checked, so I didn't know if you had me turned off.
No, you're good to go. So at this time, we'll go ahead and call the.
Okay, wait a minute. So now I can't hear you.
God. Everybody else hear me? Colin, can you hear me?
Hold on just a minute, you guys. I'm sorry. I can't hear you at all on mine. Say something for me.
Ms. Crable, can you hear me?
All right, I can't hear anybody and I have my volume turned all the way up. Let me log out and log back in. not working. Is someone talking?
Good morning, Ms. Graybill.
Chris, I see your face. Can you like move your lips to see if you're
Good morning, Ms. Graybill.
okay? All right. So I'm not. All right. I'm gonna log back out and log in on my phone. Sorry. Hey.
It's nice how technology has made our lives easier.
You have a phone on or anything?
No, my phone's right here. It's not on.
Nothing?
Now I'm unmuted so they can hear us.
Stephanie, we can hear you now.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. A comedy of errors on this Tuesday morning. That last orange ball you saw was my cat.
Okay.
ruined
Can
my
somebody
connection.
resend me the link and I'm gonna log in on my phone. I can't come up with my problem on my computer.
Miss Craybill, we can hear you.
I don't think she can hear us.
You can hear us. That's the issue. Gotcha.
I'm really sorry for wasting everybody's time. Yeah, I know you can hear me. But I can't hear anybody. Something with my computer. So I need to log on my phone. somebody's trying to sign me in, but I think it's my computer. So if you could send me the link, I will link in on my phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. You're on mute, Ms. Crable. We did hear you. You're on mute now.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Well, at this time, I will go ahead and call the New Hanover County Board of Education Policy Committee meeting to order. I will call the roll. Ms. Crable,
I'm here.
Mr. Wildebohr, and I am here. A quorum is present. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Any additions or deletions?
No, approved
None, I'll
as presented.
I will approve the agenda as presented. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes or amend them.
Approve the minutes.
All right, Ms. Crable, how do you vote? I'll second. Ms.
Yes,
Crable, how do you vote?
yes,
I also vote yes. Minutes are approved. The next item on our agenda are policy updates. These are our internal policy updates. This is something that we have been discussing for a long time with Mr. O'Brien, with Ms. Stagger when she was here. But Mr. O'Brien, I'll just let you start. This is a part-time admission of homeschool students for our students who might wish to participate in extracurricular activities or athletics. So can you walk us through this? It's been a long time in the making.
Yes, sir. It has been a while. We've been working on this policy, probably it seems like for the better part of 8 or 9 months. And this policy basically brings us in alignment with a current practice that we are allowing. So we do allow students the opportunity to dual enroll with us, and this policy just makes it official, so to speak. So this is a practice that we've allowed. It really goes back to when we were taking a look at E-Academy and providing an opportunity for homeschool families to be able to access courses through public school to maintain a public school connection. Some of those students would come in as middle school students, some would come in as high school students, and they have the opportunity to dual enroll, and sometimes they make the full transition over to us at some point. There is an athletic caveat as well. The policy wasn't started for athletics, but since the policy has come about, there is an opportunity for students to participate in athletics through this particular policy as well. Currently, I'm not aware of any athletes that we have at this point that are dual enrolled that are participating, but we have had a handful in the past, probably no more than 5 or 6 in the past few years. But it does provide that opportunity for students to participate in extracurricular activities if they meet all of the criteria and the policies that are set forth by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction for middle school sports and the North Carolina High School Athletic Association for high school sports. But currently, I'm not aware of any athletes right now that are dual enrolled through this policy.
All right. Well, I appreciate you putting it together, and Mr. Shive, if you pass along my thanks to Ms. Stagner. Ms. Crable, do you have any questions on this policy?
Yeah, I did actually. All right. So in under the elementary section, it says that we are not able to do that right now. But my question was, are schools like the Hill School or programs that are similar, are they considered homeschool? Like when we have kids dual enrolled in those?
So this would not apply to charter schools or to private schools or anything that would be considered a school. This is really just for homeschool students. It's only a policy that allows this for homeschool families.
Okay. So in section B, number 3, where it says the student must notify the principal or designee prior to the beginning of the academic semester. So we are basically, and they can pick whatever school. So we're basically saying that a homeschool student can pick whatever school they want to go to.
No, they would have to go in district, or they would have to follow current policy if they were applying to go to a signature program. They would have to follow the regular policies that any other student would, but they would first and foremost be assigned to their district school.
Okay, and then they would just have to do the open enrollment as everybody else. Okay,
Just like anybody else would.
Okay, in that same section, number 8, where it says part-time enrolled students must participate in all required district and state federal testing. Does that mean just for the class they're enrolled in, or everything that's offered that the school has?
So it would be a little bit different depending on the grade level. So 6-8 middle school, that's grade level testing. So if they were enrolled, say as a 7th grader, they would have to take all 7th grade tests that all of our other students would have to take. So they would be required to take those EOGs. At the high school level, it is course specific. So if they were enrolled in a course like English 2, they would have to take the English 2. There are some grade level tests at the high school level as well, like ACT, pre-ACT, 10th grade, 11th grade. So if they're in the 11th grade, they would need to take the ACT as well, in addition to any course-specific EOCs.
Okay, that makes sense. And so finally, how do we collect money on them?
So somewhere in this policy, I'm not sure where, it says that they have to enroll for half of a day. So that is the threshold for ADM.
Okay, well, it says the student is subject to all fees for the course. So I took that to mean like if you had a lab fee. I mean, so are we asking these homeschool kids to pay like $100 per course, like you were paying at a college? Is that what that says?
No, but if they did enroll, say through CCP over at Cape Fear Community College, just like all of our other students, they would have to pay for their books and fees. We currently don't provide that from the traditional high school. So if a student was dual enrolled with us, but also taking a course over at the community college, they would be responsible for books and fees, just like our students would be in our traditional schools.
Okay, I guess I'm thinking of at the beginning of the school year, we get X amount of dollars for each student. So with a homeschool partially enrolled, would we get half of that money? Or if they're not with us for like the first 10 days?
I'm probably going to defer to Mary Hazel on that, but I do believe that we would get the full ADM if they were enrolled for half a day, but I would defer to Mary Hazel, I think, on that question.
Well, we'd get the money if they were enrolled within the first 2 months. It's an average of the first 2 months. It's really not by student. It's just an average of our enrollment over those first 2 months.
Okay, so if a student enrolls prior to the first semester, we would get they would count in our enrollment. But if they enroll prior to the second semester, then we don't get their money. Is that right?
But that's true about all of our students. I mean, that's the way our funding works. So it's a higher of the first 2 months, ADM.
Okay.
All of our funding for every student works that way, and it would also include these students.
Okay. I'm good. Thank you all. I'm good to move this forward.
Okay. All right. So we will go ahead and put policy 3105 on the agenda for first reading. Thank you very much, Mr. O'Brien, for your work. Thank you, Mr. Shive, and please thank Ms. Stagner for us. I know this one was somewhat of a heavy lift, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. Julie Varnum also was key on this as well. Just want to point that out. So thank you, Julie. And I'm actually I'm actually logging off. So thanks very much. You guys have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
Mr. O'Brien. Have a good day. All right, moving on to our agenda with policy updates from the North Carolina School Board Association. The first policy that I have is 7100, recruitment and selection of personnel. And I guess we can start with our Director of HR, Dr. Barnes.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
The reason to move this policy forward is a part of our fingerprinting initiative. We want to make sure that we have that in policy before we implement it. And so I asked this to be brought forward a little early. This policy 7100 actually takes the place of several of our old policies and wraps them all up into one sort of mega policy, for lack of a better word. It would address background checks in our current policy 6133, our nepotism policy 6080, and our fraternization policy 6081. And so it speaks specifically, this policy is drawn from the School Board Association's policy with a couple of added triggers in it. If you look, the biggest change is on page 2, towards the bottom. And that speaks to our final candidate for employment being asked to submit for fingerprinting. Now, the fingerprinting requirements are different for pre-K. That's part of the state's early childhood program. And so there's a couple of additional requirements in that aren't required for our current employees. And so it needed its sort of standalone section. We will pay for both pre-K and for fingerprinting for our regular employees as well. And it's set up to move forward once the policy is enacted, when it goes for final. So the rest of it, if you want to scroll through, that's the biggest change. But we did put in a couple of caveats about criminal records check for current employees if we feel the need for it, even though our BIB program does trigger and hit us whenever a current employee is arrested or charged. So we find that out, but it doesn't preclude us from going back and doing a background check again if we want to. And then if you look, that's most of the policy, and the nepotism is included on page 5.
Dr. Barnes, just a question here. A final candidate for employment shall be asked to consent. Why wouldn't we require the fingerprinting?
I can chime in on that, Mr. Boyle. That language is directly from the state statute that authorizes us to fingerprint. And so we're required to ask for their consent. But if they refuse to consent, then the statute says that we can use that refusal. We can consider that refusal in the employment decision. So basically,
Okay.
If somebody refuses to consent, then we can say, well, then we're not going to offer you the position.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Like when I ask my child to fold their laundry, it's not really, their choice.
It's not a request.
But at the end, at the end of that sentence, it does say the Board of Education shall consider refusal of consent when making employment decisions. So if someone is, they would be ineligible, I would not recommend them to you for hire.
Okay, and to clarify this marries 3 different policies, 3 of our current policies into one.
Yes, sir. It does do background checks. 6133, policy 6080 is nepotism, and 6081 is fraternization.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Crable.
There is another policy 6121 that talks specifically about administrator contracts, and we think because the contracts have changed in the last few years, we want to have a policy about contracts. So we will merge the teacher administrator contracts into one policy when we do our policies when we come up for regular review.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Crable, do you have anything on sexual harassment?
Yeah, I do have just a couple questions, and some of them are just for clarity. In the general principles, what is genetic information? I mean, like, how is that different than gender identity? It says, we will make employment offers without regard to race, color, religion, national origin, military affiliation, genetic information. Does that mean like if you have a disease or something?
I would think that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's probably a reference to a federal law that prohibits employers from discriminating against employees or applicants based on their genetic information. To my knowledge, we do not collect genetic information about any of our applicants. But
okay, I was just, I'd never, that's one of the things I'd not seen in any of like the standard kind of language. So I was just wondering what that was. Okay. So in section B under recruitment, about halfway down, there's a line that says the superintendent or designee may forego publicizing a vacancy or shorten the length of time a vacancy is publicized if the position is filled through lateral assignment, reassignment, promotion of a current employee. I was just wondering, does that kind of, to me, that means that we already have pre-selected somebody for the job, and is that right? And then that the superintendent or you as assistant superintendent has the latitude to just say, I want to make this lateral move instead of posting it? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, and it sort of marries to the superintendent has the right to move employees for the betterment of the education of the district. And so it kind of marries to that a little bit, but it's very seldom used, quite frankly. But that's, you're pretty much on the nose with what it's for.
Okay, all right, just wanted to make sure, because I know that in past, we have moved people. Well, never mind. I'm not even gonna go on the record with saying that. Never mind. So, all right. So now we're in section C number 2. Is a criminal history check and a background check the same thing?
Colin, I'll let you answer that.
Where's the language where it says background check? Does it say background check in the policy?
It does in some I mean, I've seen background check and criminal history check in both. So I just wanted to see, I didn't highlight where it says background check, but I guess, is that the new terminology that we're using, is criminal history check?
Well, I guess the only additional thing that would be included within a background check would also be a check of the sexual offender registry.
Okay.
Which, someone would have to have been convicted of a crime in order to be on that registry, but I guess that is possible. You could consider that separate from a criminal history check. So background check would encompass both of those.
Okay. And I think that we do address the sex registry in a different paragraph. So that would be covered. Okay. So I forgot to, in the paragraph right above that, the lines that are underlined where it says, I'm pointing at and you can't see, the failure to make a timely disclosure of an arrest, it's underlined. It's right up at the very top of the screen. Is that something from an old policy?
No, what that is specific to if you have applied for a job and you have been arrested or charged, you have to tell us before we hire you.
Yeah, I'm clear on what it means. I was just wondering why it was underlined. Is it new stuff, or is it something from our old stuff? Because normally it's like highlighted in red.
I don't know if we moved it from another section. I don't remember
Okay.
what, we just thought it belonged there.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was just curious as if we got it from another place. So in section 2, all the way at the bottom, a final candidate for employment or for hiring as independent contractor will be excluded from hiring on the basis. So we do all these same checks with independent contractors?
Yes.
Okay. In section 2, number 3, where we talked about, we added in, that they will have to submit, like, I guess, for cause randomly, a criminal history check. Why did we take out fingerprinting at that time?
That was my edit as well, just because fingerprinting is just a part of one way of checking somebody's criminal history. So we could check someone's criminal history through using our background investigation bureau, or we could choose to, request that somebody consent to fingerprinting again. But those would both fall under criminal history check. Okay,
so having or fingerprinting is redundant, but we can still require fingerprinting if we want to?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, all right, just getting clarification since this is all kind of new. The last question I had was it's right above nepotism, section E, where the lines that we struck out, when several applicants for the same position are equally qualified and suitable for the position, the employee within the school system will be given priority. Why why would we not want to give our current employees, if everything is equal, why wouldn't we want to do that? Like tie goes to the runner in baseball, to keep our good employees, moving forward on their career paths.
I think I was the one that struck that. I didn't think it was needed because it's good practice anyway. It's
Okay.
one that I didn't think was needed in policy because it's something we'll be doing as part of our sort of growing internally anyway.
Okay, so you would have your it would never get to that because your rubrics would be such that you would be able to break the tie. If tie is the right word.
Yeah, we would assume that they would have home court advantage already. Okay.
And so the last, this is the real last one. Letter 3, when we're talking about in an emergency, the superintendent puts the person in the job in between board meetings. So it's that first paragraph. So I'm just wondering if we move the person, or does this say that if we're moving the person into the job prior to us approving, what happens if we don't approve? Do we have to take that person out, or are we just telling the person, you will have this job if you're approved? I mean, help me understand that wording.
For me, this means contingent by approval of the board, means that it's interim based until the board approves the personnel at the next board meeting.
Okay,
So
but it says in situations in which the employee must be hired between board meetings, the superintendent is authorized to approve hiring contingent upon the approval of the board. So if he approves hiring, does that mean the person starts the job? And then if we were to say, I can't imagine us doing that, but if we were to say no, then what would happen there?
Now, generally, when we do closed session, we will pull certain jobs and talk about them individually, and then the rest of the personnel agenda is there. We usually don't have the people that are above that line that we talk about individually start their jobs until after board approval. The
Okay.
rest below that we do. So every job is interim, or every job is contingent on board approval, and that's in the letter and information they receive when they get hired.
Ms.
But
Craybill,
Okay.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes.
No, yeah. So I think that this is designed for situations where like somebody has to be put in a position immediately for some particular reason in between board meetings. And if you were to then not approve the person, then they would cease working for us. We would owe them, obviously, have to pay them for the time that they had been working, but they would have never been approved by the board, and so their employment would end.
Unless
Okay.
unless they were moved internally, and then they would return to the position they held before.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I just don't want us ever to get to that position where we say, okay, good to go. I show up, I'm at my desk. Okay, not good to go. That just doesn't sit right. But I'm sure this would be very few and far between. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move policy 7100, recruitment and selection of personnel, forward as is.
Yes.
Next policy on our agenda is 7360, crowdfunding on behalf of the school system. And since we're talking money, I will let Mary Hazel Small take over. Ms. Small, one of our favorite topics.
Good morning.
Nelson, can I butt in for just 1 minute? So why are we talking about this one right now when we should kind of just be talking about it in the other 8,000 series? Why is this one special?
I'm not sure I can answer that other than it references 2 different sections, one being the 7s and then also
Okay.
finance. But I was actually going to ask that we pull this one because the language that's being recommended is much more encouraging of this practice than our current procedures. We allow it, but in a very controlled situation because there is some risk with this. And so I would like for us to have a little bit more time to consolidate our procedures, which weren't available to the School Boards Association, into the policy and bring it back next time.
Well, I concur with that because this will save us like 10 minutes of talking because I had a bunch of questions because I know that how we use it.
We did as well, so.
Okay,
Okay, great. So we're gonna go ahead and pull policy 7360 crowdfunding on behalf of the school system, and we will bring that back next time. The next policy on our agenda is fiscal goals, policy 8000. Ms. Small, do you want to start with us?
Certainly, this one appears to be straight out of the law, and we have no concerns. And I keep saying we because Ashley's here with me, so we'll both be available to answer questions, but it's fine as written.
the only question I had, this may be a semantic for Colin, the last part of the last statement where the second sentence, only two, it says, with the board's objective providing all students with a sound basic education as required by law. Does this statement imply that we will meet all the requirements of Leandro since it's now and always has been required by the law?
Well, I think it's just saying that all decisions of the board with respect to his finances will be in pursuit of meeting Leandro.
So
And-
is that just implied, or do we have to say that?
Well, can I? Oh, sorry,
Please jump
Colin.
in. No, please
So
jump.
we have always, our district has always provided an equitable, monetarily sound education. We're a fortunate district. So the basis of Leandro was for those districts, I think there were 5 of them, who could not provide the access that others were providing by state. And so we are actually doing much above what the state is requiring. When I say much, I can really, and without any pause, say above. I mean, our class sizes are smaller. Our funding, our teachers, whatever our needs are, they're met. And so we are providing, I mean, not even just the base. I would say we have the Cadillac Rolls Royce version. And Mary Hazel, I know she's smiling behind the mask. We're providing a lot.
You can tell I'm smiling, yeah.
Yeah, we're providing a lot. So yes, Leandro, yes, but I feel comfortable in our budget and how it's appropriated to ensure that we're able to give a sound basic education.
Okay, that's what my thoughts were. I was just sort of making sure that that's what we really intended.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm good.
Okay, policy 8000 on the agenda as is. Our next policy under discussion will be policy 8100. And we'll stick with Ms. Small, it's your day.
Thank you. So the recommendations of this policy we agree with, but down in section B under process, where we were incorporating some language in from our current policy, I would recommend a change to the sentence that starts principals and say that principals and administrators submit requests and written justification to the superintendent for consideration. And I would strike the rest of that because it's really up to the superintendent what the priorities are that are come forward to the board. We don't have to get that far into the process in this policy. So that would be my recommended change.
Okay, I have no problem with that. I like having that. I don't know why it was removed.
Could you repeat? I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, you're kind of like breaking up, Nelson, like
start before that. So that's kind of a late date. But you know, I think that's, if you wanted to leave it in, we certainly could. I didn't strike it. That was just what was recommended. It's currently in our current process, and it was recommended not to come forward. It's certainly not required by law. But we are, you know, we start the planning process in the fall and move through it. And if the board wants to vote on the calendar by January 31st, we could certainly leave it in. So it's more been presented for information, and it wasn't a vote. So it's the board's pleasure on that.
Well, kind of to follow up on that question with Nelson is, I took that to mean that by the 31st is when we would have this budget calendar. And I don't know that I've ever really seen a budget calendar. At least this year, I didn't see a budget calendar, but I know that we talked about it many times. And you came to our board meeting several times, you know, we're going to talk about it, and now we're going to talk about it again, and now we're going to talk about it again. So is that a budget calendar that we should see that says January 31st, we're going to get preliminary, and then, you know, February, we're going to get almost preliminary, and then, you know, like that kind of thing?
It's more of a district calendar. We gave us last year. It was at a higher level than usual. It was one screen that was presented in a PowerPoint to you, but it was a calendar. Right. In previous years, it's more detailed. And certainly we work with a more detailed calendar about what happens at the principal level and the, you know, department level before it gets to the board. So we do have a calendar that we normally finalize in December and send out to everybody when we do the first training with principals. So that's more of a, you know, a one-page sheet with all the steps to the process. So if the board wants to see that entire process, not just the part they're involved in, which is what we did last year, we can certainly go back to that. Last year, we just tried to streamline it. So whatever your preference is, we can do it either way. Because the board doesn't normally start talking about the budget till January, but we start talking before that. So,
well, and you know, I think that is a good point, because I think a lot of people think that, you know, you just sort of pull the budget out, you know, in January and say, here we go. It just and that's when, I guess maybe that's when principals have to submit their stuff to you. Don't they submit like in January or February?
Right. And to be honest, for the last 2 years, the process has been, you know, because of COVID, has been slightly different. And so it was more streamlined, and we kind of knew what our priorities were going in. And the requests from the principals were more focused on capital, that kind of thing. So we, you know, this year we'll be going back to a more traditional process. So if you want that referenced in here, you probably don't need a date. You probably just need to say the superintendent shall submit to the board a calendar outlining everything except a due date. I don't know that a due date needs to be in the policy, but that's your choice.
I'm fine with that, but I would like to have that language added just because I like the calendar, and so, you know, people can sort of expect when our budget meetings will occur. And the only other thing I had on page 100 was I'd like to strike May, and on page 2 where it says the board may hold at least one public hearing on the proposed budget, and I would like to make that shall. I think we should have one public meeting on the budget. I know the county commissioners do it. You know, I have no problem with a meeting directly related to our budgeting process.
And is that, Nelson, are you talking about that to be a meeting where we talk about it, or a meeting where we have to, a meeting where we would be listening to only community input? Because a public hearing, I think, means where we're sitting there and people are talking to us, like redistricting. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what it means to me. And
so you want to make that mandatory?
I know we haven't done it in the past, but I think it's a good idea.
So can I interject here just a little bit? So our budget is a little different from the commissioners, as the rules are, they're local funds. They're able to, everyone's vying for dollars from them. Whereas with state, local, and federal, there are specifics that we must do with our federal dollars. Like there's no wiggle room. With state dollars, there's a formula that we have to use with that formula. With local, of course, that comes from our commissioners, and that comes with our ask, and that ask comes from my recommendation, my proposed budget to the board. So I'm just this new budget process. I think that what you're wanting, because there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes before it actually gets to you. Because when it gets to you, then I'm actually doing a proposed budget of this is what it looks like. That's my role to do. And then I'm good with the public hearing because we share with this is what we're going to do. This is what we're asking for. We're doing an overview, and there's sometimes presentations, but I'm not sure the direction of what the board is wanting. If you're taking it in that direction.
Well, yeah, because what you've described, it's two different things. It's one, like a call to the audience. Here's what we're proposing. Here are my thoughts on that. And then the other one is, I'm giving you input before you make the proposal. So I don't know that. Yeah, I can't. I'm having a hard time speaking for what our current board would say on that. We must involve people earlier, or yeah.
If I could, I would say that throughout the year, concerns are shared with board members, that certainly,
right,
and with us, that certainly go into the process for developing the budget. And the next to the last paragraph does address that, we may hold a public hearing, and most years we do. We don't always have much comment, but generally the superintendent makes his recommendation in April. We don't approve it until May, and the budget hearing is either at the second April meeting or it's at the May meeting before the board votes. So that's how we've done it in the past. And like you say, it's an opportunity to speak. Some years we have none, and some years we have, 3 or 4 people. We haven't had a lot. There's always much more interest in speaking at the county commissioners in terms of if there's something controversial, it usually happens at theirs, in terms of, maybe it's been several years, but maybe something's being recommended, and a lot of teachers or parents will go to the commissioners and speak at their public hearing about funding for us. But we don't control revenue. We are only requesting a certain amount based on needs, or proposing what we're going to do with the revenue we expect to receive. It's really more the second.
I think an easier way to explain it is that the board is voting on the new budget proposal. So everything that's already in place, the board has already approved. So like if we have a budget, I'm saying of $2, you've already approved the $2 this year. We're asking for $4 next year. And so you're voting on the new. So in order to undo budget items from the year before, then that means there's revenue that's tied to positions, to people, to professional development. So you're actually approving the new ask and not the old ask.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely clear on that one. Let me, as we debate this 1 second, if we jump up, and this is relevant, believe me, counselor, if you go to A, number 1, where it says establishing the priorities of the school system, as we're putting together our budget, I'm thinking that we should add some words in there, establishing the priorities of the school system, using the strategic plan, because our strategic plan should be guiding our budget, right?
Well, remember, you've given me goals. So my goals will filter through. And let's just play devil's advocate and say that the strategic plan does not align to the budget.
Okay. But it should, though. I mean, that's what
it should, but let's say it doesn't. But my goals do align to the budget. So when we're establishing priority of the school system, recognizing that providing students the opportunity to receive a sound basic education, improving students' success will always be paramount concerns. Everything that I'm presenting from my goals are actually in that priority, that first one. And then
Okay.
got to do fiscal, long-range plannings for capital. So you get all of that in there. And then the next one, like these are things that we already take into consideration when we're building the budget.
Right. And so I guess what my thought process was on this is, and it's going back to your $2, $4 thing, is that we're going to be getting our strategic plan in the next couple months, so and so that would be for next year going forward. It's not necessarily just like, we're going to change what we're doing right now and move straight to the strategic plan unless we approve that says something is starting in April, right? I mean, the strategic plan is for next year. Is that right?
Right. So we would start to, our budget would have to be aligned for next year.
Yes. And so that's what I'm getting at, is that if we have our strategic plan and we know where we want to be going next year and going forward, shouldn't our budget align with that? The new budget, the $4 budget, should be aligning with that, right?
Right. But also
All right, so
my goal. So, and I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay.
So my goals, that the 3-4 goals that I have are also aligned, and they take place. So that's for next year too. So we've already started to put action steps of how to reach or attain those goals. And so I think this element of budget planning, yes, those are the elements that go into it, but the goals of the superintendent, the goals of the strategic plan should all be woven into one, so that you don't have 3 different documents that are saying something different.
Okay, so we definitely are saying the same thing. The whatever goals you have right now are
Yes.
really supposed to end in June, because in June 2022, and
Yes.
then we're going to start all over again, and that's going to be, and they're all going to be aligned with the strategic plan. So all these things are coming together. All right, I just wanted to be clear. Can we write that in our policy that we want our budget to be aligned with our strategic plan? Because that to me is good fiscal management. It's like this is where we say we're going, and this is how we're going to pay for it. This is, this is how we're going to get there. Does that make sense?
Ms. Crable, a suggestion might be for A1, instead of that the budget planning would establish the priorities, we could just say will include alignment with the priorities of the school system. So
yes,
we're not
I'm good
saying
with
that
that.
we're going to determine the priorities, we're going to align resources with the priorities. Would that fix it?
Yes, that was exactly what I'm trying to say. Thank you so much. I need to go back to my high school writing class. So my persuasive writing was not good on that, but yes, that's what I would like. Does that make sense? Is that doable?
It's what we have always
I know
tried
that's
strive
what
to
you
do, but
do.
it's good to have it
Yeah.
in more clarity in the policy, I think.
Well, yeah, and then that way we're like, to get back to Dr. Fass's point, we're all moving together with one document, and not like 5 documents all over the place that we have to pull together and cross check, because that is it doesn't happen. We get lost in that. Okay.
And I'm fine.
So that
I'm
takes
fine
us
just-
back to Nelson's point. Do
Yeah,
we
I'm
want to
fine
have a
just keeping
hearing?
it going. No, I'm fine keeping that in there. We already have several meetings where the budget is a topic of discussion, so I'm fine leaving it as is without having a special budget hearing.
Okay. So and just a point of clarification too, Mary Hazel, in A6, where it says exploring all practical and legal sources of income, are we referring to things like bond referendums, grants, foundation donations, if we ever get a foundation? Is that what we're looking at there?
I would assume so. This was the recommended language, but just, looking for all opportunities for funding that are feasible, maybe,
And legal, yeah.
of course, legal, but
Yeah. Okay.
All right, then let's do policy 8100 as amended. Mr. Shire, have you made notes of these amendments?
I'm really struggling to hear.
I couldn't hear you, Nelson. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shire. I said, have you made notes for these policies?
I do not have any notes on this particular policy now.
Okay, so it said for A1, Mary Hazel, would you repeat what you said for A1, please, about aligning?
Just replace the word establishing with alignment with the priority.
Okay,
Oh, I apologize. Does Ms. Stagner normally keep up with all the changes that are being made?
yes, she does. And you know what else she does, Colin? She inserts those and sends those back to us.
All right, I will do that. I understand. Thank you.
Okay, we forgot to train you up.
That's okay. I got it now.
Okay. Oh, and why we have a break and it just the with that, I wanted to make sure that we recognized Ms. Chapman from Holly Shelter. She is our principal rep today. So Ms. Chapman, feel free to join in anytime that you have comments with us. Thank you for joining us as a representative from PAPA. Okay.
Okay, we are moving on to policy 8110, budget resolutions.
So much of this, everything in red is coming from our current policy, and just going into a little bit more detail of what we do just based on the timing. You know, we normally don't have enough information to finalize the budget resolution prior to July 1, so we do an interim budget, so that is explained, and also talks about our budget amendments. I will say down at the bottom of number C4, the county, I'll read it to you, but this is the law in which the county can choose to approve our budget at a more detailed level, you know, up to 25%. Let's see, increases or decreases in the amount of the county appropriation allocated by purpose function by 25% or more. So if we were to make a change, the law would say, we had 25%. The law allows it to be 10%, and the county is currently approving that at a 10% level. So if we choose to, so it's really up to what the county does. And so I don't really know why that's 25% or more, but I believe the law is 10%. Colin, are you familiar? It may have changed. I love 25%.
Yeah, I can pull up the statute real quick.
Okay.
I could be mistaken, but I believe the law is 25%, and our particular board is more comfortable with that 10% number. Maybe Dr. Fast has more information.
That's why we're checking, because we would love 25%, because I think we're at 10%. So any changes that we make that are 10%, we have to take it back to the commissioners and get approval. And so there's been a couple times where Mary Hazel has gone before the commissioners to ask for permission to move local funds. This is only for local funds for us to transfer, because if it all stems back to what our asks are for from our local funds. And then that's why we can't approve a budget before they approve their budget. And then once they approve theirs, they tell us what we're going to be able to do. And then what our ask, if we change our ask that is greater, 11%, we have to go and say that we need an addendum. However, if the state says this, then we would then need to go talk to the county commissioner and say, we need you to raise it because this is what the state says. Hopefully.
And really, this is about the county appropriations. So for the county appropriations, when they don't actually tell us how to budget it, but once we budget it and say, this is what we're going to do, that's what they expect us to stick with unless we come back to them, as Dr. Faust is explaining. And so the law allows them to just approve it, you know, at the total level. They don't have to do any kind of detailed approval, but currently they approve it at the purpose function level in their appropriation to us. And so if we make changes of more than 10%, we have to go back to them. So that could change. That's something they decide every year. So I wouldn't want our policy to be too restrictive, because we don't, you know, we'd like it to be as flexible as possible. So I'm really kind of asking for advice here on how the board wants us to read. I don't know that you have to list the statute in the policy, but we would always follow whatever the commissioners do.
Yeah, that was my question, is like, are we allowed to say what our threshold of change is, or do we have to get them to approve our threshold of change.
It is their decision. So you will approve your budget, and then they will, you know, if they restrict us in the, for example, we're kind of talking about local, but they also approve capital by project. And so it says transfers between capital projects exceeding 50 must be approved by the board. We also take those to the county commissioners because they allot by project. And it's mainly just keeping them informed. We submit all capital transfers to them because they're just very interested in our capital allotment. So I don't know if we need to spend a little bit more time on this and come up with some language. I just wasn't sure why it was in here.
I just looked at the statute, and the default is 25%, but
Okay.
the county by in its ordinance can state a lesser percent, as low as 10%. So 10% is the lowest that they can go. And it has to say that in their ordinance. Otherwise, the default is 25%.
And I guess because it says if the county commissioners, that kind of, you know, they don't have to choose this. So should we say 10 to 25?
Increases by 25. I could say by 25%.
So it's just really transfers is what we're talking about.
Yeah, unless a different percentage is included in the county ordinance. So you could kind of put that language in there.
Do you think that we should, do you think that we should ask the county commissioners before we approve a policy that they aren't going to uphold?
I think the issue is they're going to make this choice annually, and it really isn't our choice. So
okay,
that's the reason I'm not sure it belongs in the policy other than just informationally, you know, and maybe we could just reword it to state the county's authority in this just for information.
Right. Even if we just remove that whole paragraph altogether, it would still be the law, and we're still required to do it if the county makes that choice.
but I still think it's good for us to have a statement that says something to the effect of following county ordinances, you know, for changes. You know, just that way we don't have to change the policy every year.
Could we just list it through? Hold on a minute. Let's see. Increases capital function. Could we just end it after function and say after that be increases or decreases in the amount of county allocated to a purpose function in accordance with the county adopted county budget, and just leave out the percent?
Well, my only concern there is that then that might read that any percentage increase requires that we take.
Well, I don't think by law they can.
No. Well, so do we have does anybody object if it reads increases or decreases the amount of county appropriation allocated to a purpose or function by 25% or more, or other percentage specified by the county in its ordinance?
But not more than, but not less than 10%, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm good with that, to change the wording to make it so that we're basically getting in between the 10 and 25%.
And it would just reflect the law.
Yes, right.
You okay with that, Mary Hazel?
I am, and we will continue to try to talk them out of it every year, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay, I'll make that change.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Shy. What's the policy?
Can I mention one other thing? I don't know why I started at the bottom. I have another question at the top, unless there's something else about this part of the policy. Up at the top, it says the board will, the second sentence, the board will provide schools with the maximum flexibility in the use of funds to enable the schools to accomplish their student performance goals. We have never done that. We have allotted specific things, and within like school supplies, they have flexibility to use them in whatever line item they may want. But you know, they can't take supply money and turn it into a position without approval. So they really don't have maximum flexibility. So this is not in our current policy, and I'm just not sure it's it would be a very major change in how we budget if we
This
did.
could provide, this could start equity issues, because if we're giving positions based on ADM, and they could get us out of kilter with when providing equity. I also would have a question with that. I want us to pause and think about that.
The only two schools that have maximum flexibility with state money, which is our restart schools, but they don't have maximum flexibility with local money. But you know, they still have a lot of flexibility on how they use their positions that is different than other schools. But
I personally just don't like ambiguity or subjectivity in any policy. And when you look at that, you know, maximum flexibility is extremely subjective. So I'm absolutely fine removing that language.
okay.
Unless it's stated like they're the fund. So I don't, like, we give them so much, so they're not buying positions with their funds because that's allotted. So those are allotted. If there's some way to do that, so if they, let's say an elementary school has, you know, leftover funds after everything has been allotted, let's say $24,000, and they're able to use those maximum funds to, let's say they're doing some program or something after school that they are doing, or some type of remediation that works specifically for them. But it's earmarked, I think, under that pretense it works, but I'm not sure we understand that.
And we haven't gotten, and this is the budget resolution level. We've never gotten that far into the details of how we allot in policy, you know, and if we did, we'd probably need to put a little bit more thought into it. But I like, I mean, we do have structure, but it's not at the level the board approves it. Is that doesn't sound right, but we have formulas that we allotment formulas that the board does approve during the budget process, but we've never had those in policy.
So is this one of those things that we don't need in policy?
I don't think it needs to be there, but it's up to Dr. Faust.
So let me ask a question that might be analogous. So does this, when you're saying that, you know, the principals can use the money however they want, I'm going to use graduation coaches as an example, that a principal can choose to, you know, have a graduation coach position or a math position. Is this what we're talking about?
Well, we don't allow that. They would have to go through an approval process. This policy, which is the standard policy from the School Board Association, saying that we have never had this language. So we have never given schools the ability to just change a, you know, social worker into a teacher. They could request it and we could look at, you know, whether or not it was feasible, but it is this, the process to change a position has to go, you know, all the way through up to through HR, finance, and the superintendent's office before it can be changed.
Okay,
I
I guess
have that flexibility.
Yeah, I was looking at it from the opposite direction.
Okay.
That a teacher you can use it as a teacher or as a graduation coach. Yeah, but I wasn't looking at it crossing
Right, but that would under our current procedures would require a change that had to be approved at a higher level than just at a school.
Okay.
So for instance, prime example of this one is with Title I dollars. So individuals can buy teacher assistants, and then they can say, well, I want to make smaller class sizes, but they took their funds and spent it on 2 teacher assistants. And now they want to make smaller classes. So they come to the board and say, our classes are too large. It's like, but you use the maximum flexibility in the use of your funds to purchase your 2 teacher assistants. So it's like, then it's like, okay, so what is you didn't actually do a study of what your actual needs were prior to making that budgetary decision. And so we go through this whole needs process with principals prior to the budget. So this is all leading up to getting to the resolution. So once we bring the resolution, there's been a conversation with the principals in their building of what they actually need, what are their priorities for that school year. for every department. I met with every department this school year to find out, so what are your needs? What is it? Will this budget be sufficient in order for you to get to highly effective? So those were conversations that I met with every department head. And so then then another group does it with the principals. So we're asking prior to getting to this budget adoption. So when principals say that they need more or they don't have more, it's like, but you sat through a budget process and told us, you agreed upon the projections that were given and were able to say, hey, I believe I should have more based on this versus this. So again, there's a whole process that you don't see, but we actually do it.
Okay, so would it make sense to say that the board provides schools with flexibility for the use of funds, for the student performance within guidelines established by the superintendent, or something like that, or just take the line out?
So the board provides flexibility in the use of funds to enable the schools to accomplish their school student performance goals. I think you do that. I wanted to make sure that individuals understood what that actually means. That does not mean that you get to, you don't get to create a disaster zone in your school and then blame the board on, well, I thought this was going to work. So there has to be a formula that we use to ensure that you get the basic sound. And then with the other sources of that revenue that you have, can you afford to do X? But that's what I just wanted us to make sure. But again, like we give a lot, like there's a lot that goes on into this. And we help, and they have a lot of autonomy when it comes to their needs. Like for instance, at a high school, they may say, well, I need another math teacher instead of this science teacher, so I'm going to swap out. And they do that during the budget process.
Right. And I guess that's what I was getting at, was that because and I use the graduation coach as an example because, what I've heard over the years is, well, my principal didn't want to do that. They wanted to use that position for something else, so that's.
And so, yes, that's great. Sorry for cutting you off, but I also wanted to, that you're right. But then that comes at your school improvement team. So they're talking that at the beginning of what their needs are. So that budget process actually starts at the school in that meeting. And then once the principal gets to the level where he or she is talking with finance about what their needs are, their school has already agreed upon what they want. And then he is bringing it to the table, and then he or she goes back to their school improvement plan and say, this is what we were able to get out of our budget.
Okay.
And I think I would be comfortable with it if it just didn't say maximum. We certainly do provide them with flexibility with certain funding sources, especially Title I, which is required, and as well as the ability to request flexibility. But maximum flexibility to me means like a charter school where there's just a dollar amount and they can do whatever they want. And we don't do that at all. And so
that's what I was thinking. We do not do that at all.
If you just took out maximum, that would, that would work.
Okay.
If you want to leave the idea in.
I'm good with that, Nelson, taking out maximum and because I think everybody knows they have to follow the guidelines anyway.
So then if is there anything else on 8110?
That's it for me.
Okay, so let's move 8110 on to the agenda for first reading as amended.
Yeah, and so there's two amendments. There's the one in the intro paragraph, and there's the one on C4.
Yeah, I think, is that before the next one? Was it in that one?
Is that right now? You got that, Colin?
I've got it. Yep.
Okay.
Actually brought up a good point that applies to lots of these policies. The law refers to my position as school finance officer, and we refer to it as chief financial officer. And I don't care which way it is in policy. We probably just should be consistent. And I don't know what the preference is, but it's all throughout these policies.
Well, and you know what? I have that circled on every page. And I forgot to ask that question because I like to call us who we are. So yeah, I would like to call us who we are, like what we refer to, so people know.
Is that okay, Colin, with the law? You're muted.
Sorry. So school finance officer is the kind of the statutory designation. You know, your title within the school system is chief financial officer, but you are, you know, designated as the school finance officer. And so I think it makes sense for the policy to say school finance officer, because at a certain point, you know, perhaps, you know, we change our titles, but we always have to have somebody who's designated as the school finance officer.
Is it possible somewhere in this section to just explain that so that people know who we're talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know if it matters, but it's confused. It's a little bit confusing. I mean, we know that, but and we're very familiar with what the law says. But I think throughout some of the other policies, as my position is referenced, we had changed it. But I mean,
Yeah.
I'm fine with it as long as it's one way or the other.
And, you know, to me, school finance officer could easily be construed as Holly Tree School, you know.
We
finance
try not
officer.
to let them use that language. There's another policy that
Yeah.
designates that as treasurer. But
Yeah.
we have had a couple in the, you know, I've gotten a couple of emails over the years where they changed their title to school finance officer. But
Right.
Trying to stick with what Colin recommended in terms of the law is a good way to go. So,
Okay, then I will not make a comment on every policy about who the school finance officer is.
thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and make a note that we have moved 8110 on to first reading with the amended language. Our next policy is policy 8210, grants and funding for special
I'm
projects.
fine with this policy as presented, but I'd be glad to answer your question.
I had no notes on this policy.
Yeah, I had a question on where it says designated program, this is A, paragraph 2, designated program administrators. So does that mean the grant administrator or project administrator? Who does that mean?
Yeah, so some allotments are programs, some allotments are grants. And we use the term program administrator, but we could say grant program administrator, you know, because it kind of depends. If it's federal, it's a grant. If it's state, it's a program. So you know, we're talking about grants here, so maybe grant administrator is a better term. But
I would like to just so back again, just so we're clear who we're talking about.
right, and we do assign, every grant is assigned, you know, an administrator. So
And by assigned an administrator, does that mean that means the grant administrator, not administrator like a superintendent or a principal? Or
well, it could be. I mean, if a school got a grant, then I would assign the principal as administrator of that grant. If instructional
Gotcha.
services got a grant, we would pick a director and say, you're the administrator of that grant. So,
And I sign as chief administrator for our federal grants. So when they're applying
Okay.
for some of the federal, I said that wrong, state and federal. But there's like a click on a button. So I think we know who that terminology is. Yeah.
And so do we keep like in where it says it's coordinated by student support services, not to put this in the policy, but who would be that person in student support services?
oh, I missed that. Where is that?
It's the last line where it says employees may apply for other grants using the approval process coordinated by student support services department.
So that is how we had done like small grants that people apply for outside. And we had discussed whether or not that belonged there or in finance, you know, but right now finance is focused on the larger grants. So
And in my priority list of asks, which there is a director of grants that would have reported there, but that'll probably be in this budget ask if we get
Coming
there.
up.
Yes, the new year.
Yes, the new year coming up. Yeah, because that's what my question was, is like, and I had it back I have it also in the grants the federal grants policy. Is there one person right now who keeps like a spreadsheet of all the grants we have and who the administrators are, so that the school system at a snap can take a look at, here's what we've been awarded, here's how much, and here's who's in charge of that.
That's me.
Yes.
That's you. That's not the person in student support services. So who is,
this is about applying for other grants, those small grants that a school might apply for, a department. There's a process for approving those things to make sure that they, and we have a, depending on the dollar amount and whether or not they want to do something related to a building, it would have to go to operations. And we have a process to make sure that we can accept a grant once. We don't want to apply for anything we can't accept. We don't want to go through that work. So before they apply, they have to get it approved. And that's what that process is. And those are for smaller grants.
okay, so that takes me back to, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you go.
I was just going to say a lot of grants just come to us through the Department of Public Construction, both state and federal. And so it's a different process.
Right.
We don't actually have to apply. They just come.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Faust.
So even if, in just adding on to what Mary Hayes was saying, is that sometimes we're flow through for the grants, but any money that is coming through that has to be spent, finance can track it and see, because there's a process. She was saying there's a process. So we can go into our system and see, how small, how great and then of course, like there's that approval. And as she stated, if we were receiving $100,000 grant, we would have to, there's procedures that we have to account for, and making sure we have individuals on her team who will actually ensure that we're following the guidelines that are within the grant to make sure that we don't get in trouble for spending it for something that was not what we signed up for.
Oh yeah,
and I will say there's a whole nother policy on federal grants. So this is not meant to cover federal.
Yes, I understand all that, and my eyes have quit rolling from reading the federal grant one. But so my point in all of this was, if student support services is not the one who is managing this, then we should say in our policy that all this grant work is managed through you.
Well, they're managing whether or not people can apply for the appropriateness. A lot of these small grants are for things that they would decide if are appropriate instructionally or school, in a school. That's the reason it's there. It could be either place, but that's where it has sat for many years.
All right. So I would like for it to sit with the person who does the work. And if it's the finance department, then shouldn't we put it with the finance? I mean, why are we saying, because if someone's trying to follow this policy, then they're reaching out to student support services, and student support services is saying, it's not my job. And
that's not what it's trying. What we're saying is that we account for grants after they're received in finance. This is about applying for grants. Employees may apply for other grants using the grant application process coordinated through them. They are only approving the application process. And depending on dollar amount, I might be part of that process for approval, but it's a separate thing.
Yes.
So once we receive a grant, then everything you say is true.
Right.
Right. So if I am Stephanie Craybill, teacher, and I want to apply for a grant, and I have questions with the grant approval process. I can't find the form, or my principal says, you got to use the right form, bring it back to me later. Who am I going to call? And how am I going to find that information?
Student support services and their website has that whole process.
So student support services is where it lands.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And is the person there the person who keeps track of all of these small grants, or do we even care? I mean, I'm kind of interested on how much money we earn from grants, and what kind of qualifications we have to go through, in order to receive some of these grants, so that we can make it easier for people to apply for grants. And because some teachers or program leaders won't apply because it's just too hard, but or they don't know what the requirements are. So I'm just trying to make it more. And I know that the director of grants that we had, 20 years ago did all that. And then we moved to a director of grants who really just looked at them, didn't really approve or anything like that. So I'm just trying to make sure that we have a policy or a place that's clear?
So it starts, so let's say if you use that analogy that you were using with the teacher,
Yeah.
the principal has to first approve to make sure that's something that they want to support at their school level.
Right.
And so if it doesn't, then it does get stopped there. And you know, if the process is in place where if, you know, let's say you want to do some social emotional things, we may already have a grant for that. And
Right.
saying that we don't need that. And so we've got to look at those. There are grants, there are teachers out there with $100,000 grants and iPads. They have all these iPads. We're flow through, so they just can't do any and everything with it. So there's some stop gaps that we run those things through to ensure that that they are key, that we are staying good with our grant. When we do when the audit is there, we also have Nancy Braswell, who is our auditor, who is checking on these things. There is some checks and balances that the general public doesn't see, or our teachers, they don't see. When they see it is when they are applying and they have to get all of these signatures on it. That's when we start to say, hey, where is this coming from? What is this? But that does lie in student services. And you know, unfortunately, Julie is out today. So she'll be able to tell you who in her department oversees that.
Okay.
So Lisa Brenner oversees it. But I will say that it's a very simple one-page process that they have to answer a few questions about, and the principal has to approve before further consideration. And if it's really small, the principal can approve it and they just tell us about it, you know, as long as it doesn't affect, you know, facilities, or there's some other things that legally we have to make sure are accounted for. And then if it's larger and it's not something that can be managed at the school with school funds, then I will make the decision whether it's budgeted funds or school funds. So those are all things that the form walks them through. So it really isn't hard. You know, maybe we need to do a better job of getting the word out, certainly, but the process is pretty easy.
So are principals clear on what their dollar amount is?
Yes.
Yes. They know exactly.
I mean, this goes back to the maximum flexibility. You know, principals are basically the little mini superintendent of their school, but they I just want to make sure that, you know, because what some principals might think is small, and this isn't going to affect anybody, another principal might go, holy cow, I can't believe you're allowed to do that.
And we have a dollar amount, and we also ask them to report those to us, even if we don't approve them centrally, so we can keep track of, as you said, you know, the grants that are out there.
Yeah. Because it's not good for us right now, it might be better like next year, you know, to try again in another grant cycle. Okay, I know that's probably a lot. That was way off target on this one, but I think it helps so we know what we're doing. So I'm all about getting some grants, you know, and writing them and applying, reading and finding them. But I just want somebody to be in charge of them, you know, to kind of know what we're doing. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
8220 on for first reading. Our next excuse me, 8210 on for first reading. Our next policy is 8220, gifts and requests.
So this is just our guidelines for donations and the process for approving donations, to make sure that, you know, we're not accepting things that could cost us more money to, you know, or there are some things that we don't accept just because they don't fit with our, you know, our plan for resources. So the process is outlined for all donations, and then specifically for technology. I did have one suggestion at the top of page 2. I'm going to have a little bit of discussion about this. It says the principal has authority to accept donations of school equipment with a value not to exceed $300. That's what it's been for a while, and any donation of school supplies, but I don't know if that dollar amount, it needs to be raised. It seems a little bit low these days. And the other topic I want to discuss it in the second paragraph there. It says the superintendent designee may accept donations, and then it's set up to, but we prefer that just be on behalf of the board. So I think that is already marked through, but we haven't, I don't think there's a need to put a dollar amount there.
Do you have an idea of what number you're looking for with regards to 300? How long ago was it changed?
About 300.
The 300, was that, I couldn't hear specifically what you said. So would you want to change it or are you okay with 300?
No, how long ago, when was the policy last revised? And how long has it been 300? And that should help us inform, our new number.
Do you know how long it's been $300?
I am not sure how long it has been that. But we have a capitalization. We inventory everything that's $1,000 and above. We if it's technology, even if it's below, we inventory, and we have procedures for that. So it's just a matter of at what point do they need to reach out to the superintendent because it's larger than that is really the question here. It's not that they couldn't be accepted. It's just, sometimes donations are very substantial. Not often, but we've had things like building to be built by people donating money kind of thing. So clearly there's got to be a dollar amount, but I just didn't know what the board's pleasure was there.
Well, I would like to put in whatever you think is fair market value. The 300 to me, I had that circled too. It seems, pretty low, especially since a lot of, parent support organizations donate a lot more than $300.
I would be comfortable with 1,000 because that's our inventory level. So that is my recommendation if the board is willing to go that high.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
And then the next paragraph, we already talked about that, sorry. And that's all the changes that I had to this.
Okay, I had a couple questions, comments. Number 2, where we're calling technology director, I think that we changed Dawn's title in several other policies.
Yes.
So that should be, we need to change Dawn to whatever Dawn is. Not whatever she is, the assistant superintendent of technology. Sorry, Dawn. And then do we need in our policy the website for donating computer hardware?
I don't actually think we do.
I think if
that's
we
kind of in
could
the weeds.
Yeah, if we could remove that, what's on the second page that talks about emailing tech donations?
Right, that one's another one too.
I think that's better. So that way, if they email me, then we can talk to them. Lately, when people email, basically they're really wanting donating to homes, to students to keep stuff. So I kind of put them in contact with an organization because we are not allowed to accept it and then give it to students to keep. So I put them in contact with other organizations and say, please reach out to this organization, and they could give the donation directly to the students.
Okay, so and that was my question was, do we also want the tech donations, email in our policy? Is that appropriate? Is that ever going to change?
No.
Okay.
So that's to be removed then?
I would think so. I've never seen it in policy before.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when I think that we should remove the on A2 the minimum standards for if you want, make it a statement, either take out the whole sentence or say if you're interested in doing that, then email, just like we did with, or take it out and just refer to it in 2.
Could we possibly,
B2.
Just on our side, I think we could possibly put it on on the website, on your website, so that they could actually see it. It's just on the landing page there, and not actually do it there. And then whatever the form is, they could just handle it in that portion.
Just say see our website, for how to do that.
Can you scroll so I can see where we're making these revisions? Is it under A2? Is that what I heard?
A2, take off the whole last sentence and put something like, go to our website, to find that information.
But could we just remove that?
Yeah, I'm just thinking we cannot just completely remove A2. We do need to kind of address the E-rate one, so we got to be careful of that second paragraph. And then also, B2. It's basically the same thing.
Yes, yes. So they should pretty much say the same thing, right?
Well,
And maybe
I think we can remove it completely and we'll just have a link on our webpage, on the technology webpage for, you know, if you want to do donations, click here and then they can click and then a form will come up or something will come up at that point. So we don't need this in the policy at all, I think is what we need to say.
So you mean B2, right?
Well,
Yes,
B2 and A2.
we wanted to keep that sentence about the E-rate,
Correct.
the gift cards, but just take that first paragraph out.
What about technology resources meeting technology standards? You know,
Yeah, the reason I liked the first sentence of A2 was about technology standards, just to let people know, and maybe we don't have to, but why we do turn away donations. But if you don't think it's necessary, we don't have to.
Right. I think we could put that on the technology page, and then just say any donations from an E-rates service provider must comply with gift rules applicable to federal agencies. And then, of course,
at this point, would we just rename A requirements for donations, since we're not going to have a 1 and a 2? Under suitability of donations, or do we just remove the requirement line? It's up a little bit higher.
Yeah, like the actual title of number, the suitability of donations, and make.
We would still have a 2.
Okay.
Because we still need to leave the sentence that says any donation from an E-rate service provider must comply with gifts rules. That's
you want that under 2. Okay.
That has to be in the policy. Yeah.
I knew it had to be there. I just didn't know if it needed to be under 2. Okay.
So I kind of like the idea on number 2, though, to say what Dr. Faust was saying, that must meet technology requirements, found on the New Haven County Schools website. Yeah, I just, so that we refer people back to that, because you may not know that. You may not know to go to our website. Or is that overkill?
Well, probably more people are going to go to the website first than look for this policy.
Okay. All right. I'm good with that.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, or changes?
Yes. Section B, where we're talking about, the approval process again, is we up that to 1,000. And are we saying that then that second sentence in the first paragraph, the principal shall report to the superintendent all accepted donations more than a nominal value, is over 1,000 more than a nominal value? Is that what we're saying?
Well, that's a very good point, because currently in our procedures, we do have it at 1,000 for all donations, because sometimes donations come with restrictions and we'd like to have that conversation with them. And so I wonder if there's now that you bring it up, a better way to word that so we're covering both of those things, because the first one's just talking about equipment.
Right. And where I was going with that, Mary Hazel, is parent support organizations. Now, I know that we have a whole separate policy on that, but that's pretty much almost what parent support organizations do, is they fundraise for stuff that the school needs. And and oftentimes it's over $1,000.
And that's fine, but the most of the time it's fundraising dollars and then the school purchases it. They don't normally, sometimes they buy it themselves, but a lot of times.
Well, we at the PTA level try and encourage the PTA to buy it, because we get to save the taxes, and we file it back.
Okay.
So,
but it is important that those donations, they don't just decide what to buy and buy it, and then we can't accept it because they bought a computer that we can't use.
Right.
So
yes.
I think it's important to leave that in there. And so,
what is nominal
could have
value,
sort of, I'd need to think about how to word it, but we may need to have language if there's any restricted donations over 1,000 have to be approved, because some donations are just general donations. Here's money, you can use it any way you want. but a lot of donations come with expectations. And so those are the ones that we need to approve. So Colin, do you have any suggestions there on how to word this? We could say, I don't know, donations of cash and school equipment not to exceed 1,000. And that doesn't mean it, that just means donations from one person. That doesn't mean.
Right.
Oh, so it's $1,000 per gift.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know that, and it's not gifts to the PTA. But if the PTA then wants to buy something, the principal, we're going to need to approve what comes in. So.
Yeah.
Why can't it not just say donations with a value not exceeding 1,000?
Yeah. Perfect. That's so smart. Okay.
Okay. Donations exceeding 1,000. So so we're taking out the nominal. Right. So principals don't have to guess what they're allowed.
Instead of saying of school equipment. So donations.
Accept donations.
So yeah, so it says the principal has the authority to accept 1, donations with a value not exceeding $1,000.
Right.
And 2, any donations of school supplies. But the requirement still remains the principal has to report the superintendent those donations.
So why don't we just not make it 1 and 2? Why don't we say accept donations of school equipment and schools, and or school supplies whose value is not exceeding $1,000? And then the principal must report all of these to the superintendent.
I think that and I'm not saying it should be this way, but I think the thought is that if it's school supplies, it doesn't require approval by the superintendent.
That has been the practice.
Okay. All right.
Why don't we just say the principal has the authority to accept all donations of school supplies and donations in
of school equipment
of
over 1,000.
And other donations, I don't know how.
Yeah,
other donations exceeding $1,000 need to be reported.
Yeah, up to 1,000. I think Ms. Craybill, somebody could not just donate school equipment; they could try to donate cash, right? Or some other,
or a scholarship, dollars, for a student, because we do get individuals who do want to donate scholarships, that they can award at the end of the school year in honor of.
We need to know if it's over 1,000 because at some point, if they're putting restrictions on the school, we have to decide how best to handle that money.
Right. So do you want to include scholarships? Because there are people that do want to provide scholarships.
I think that's why we suggested removing the school equipment language and just saying donations with a value.
Yes.
That would include.
That's what I was trying to get at. Right.
But we're good.
Okay. So just donations and take it off all the other stuff.
Yep.
Okay. So, and so that again, do we need to say something in this policy at all? I guess it's down in C where we're talking about the use of it. And I had where it says anything purchased with donated funds, including funds raised through crowdfunding campaign project or platform. Does that mean a crowdfunding platform or any other platform or project? Because I'm just trying to get back to the parent support organization, that we're again, and we probably should just go ahead and cross-reference that one in this policy, because where parent support organizations who raise money and give things to the school become the property of the school.
Right. And we've always been very clear with that to schools. That shouldn't be a surprise.
It shouldn't be a surprise, but it oftentimes is not handled the same at each school. And just believe me on past experience on fundraising.
To make sure that they're following current policy.
Right. Exactly. So, because when I was looking at the third paragraph, in C, where it talks about the kinds of things that we donate, you listed some big ones. Those were mainly like sports, suggestions, but there are things like benches, brick walkways, concession stands, library upgrades, gardens. There's all these kinds of other permanent parts of the school that get donated by people or parent support organizations. So I just didn't want our focus to be on sports stuff, because there is a lot more stuff that comes to the schools than just sports stuff.
I think we are always very clear with principals. I know Mr. Anderson covers that every year at principals meetings. I think those are examples, but we're very clear about that.
Okay. So when I was reading in the correlation table, the second bullet, it says in regards to the last sentence of A2, no donation can be accepted if it can only run with the service provided by the donor, thereby increasing the demand of the donors for the donor service. Do we need to say anything in that?
Tell me where you are.
Well, I was just reading in the correlation table, the second bullet, the first line, where I guess it's saying, you can't donate, software that only I sell, because that would, I'm using software as an example, but you can't donate something that only I sell, because it would, in order to sustain it, you have to keep buying from me. Is that what that means?
Yes, that would be what they're probably talking about.
Okay. So is it implied that that is in this policy, or is that something that McKenna was saying you need to consider that and put in your policy?
So is that the E-rate section? Is that what we're talking about?
No,
I'm not sure where we're talking about.
That's what it's talking about. A2, the last sentence, which is the E-rate services. And basically she's describing the extra rules, which is why we don't accept gifts from E-rate providers.
Okay.
Isn't that right, Dawn?
yes, we don't accept.
She's just going into the detail of the law, I believe. But
Okay. All right. I'm just making sure that we didn't miss something.
And Nancy just texted me, I missed something. At the top of page 2, where we were talking about the $1,000 and notifying you give the superintendent written notification. We might want to say superintendent or designee, because that currently comes to my office, unless you want him to get it, or unless he wants to see it. Dr. Faust, that's up to you, but currently that's me.
Yeah, we have a system that works.
Yeah, so superintendent or designee on that.
And where is that specifically, Mary Hazel?
It's right, the first black paragraph where you were going to change about the reporting to the superintendent.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Just say or designee.
Okay.
Okay, are we good with 8220? Can we move that forward as amended?
Yeah, I'm out of comments.
Okay, so 8220 gifts and requests moving forward as amended. 8224 fundraising on behalf of the school system.
So I think we had talked about, some of these issues in terms of system-wide fundraising before, and I'm fine with this policy. I just have one question under B, where it's talking about student participation in fundraising activities. And this is probably just me not understanding, but it says no student may be required to participate in fundraising activities unless it's part of the curriculum. And I was trying to imagine whenever that would be possible, but Nancy mentioned maybe sometimes they're as part of, a class doing something where they, I don't know, maybe in CTE, they might be making something that they're going to sell.
Or like Slam Jam at Laney, where they have a fundraising event where the teachers play the kids in basketball. Or a yearbook where they're selling advertisements, for their yearbook.
Right, but this is talking about,
yearbook is a class.
You can't be required to, oh, you're right. But
And
I'm
sports
not sure
marketing
that-
is a class.
Just because yearbook's a class, I'm not sure we should be required to sell ads to pass the class. You're going to build the yearbook as the class, but you don't have to sell as part of the class.
Right.
So I'm a little uncomfortable with that. But I'm going to defer to all people who know things about instruction, which is not me. It just seems like we wouldn't ever want a child to be forced to fundraise.
Mary Hazel, I would agree with you. I was struggling to think of examples myself, although I think there probably are going to be some secondary examples, but most often I think about those as more extracurricular types of activities.
Right.
So I could do a little research on this and reach out to our secondary principals to see if they've got examples of this, but I would agree with you. I don't think fundraising should be a requirement of any of our curriculums.
Right. And if we choose to sell something that maybe was created in a class, I still don't think that is necessarily saying that they're the ones having to go out and actively sell. I think that's the problem I'm concerned with. If they're doing an activity in class that they're participating in, and maybe we can research that, but I'd prefer to leave it out for now. But it's up to you.
I'd mark the same thing. I would like to leave it out. And my only thought, because that was the question I had, is where would this be part of a curriculum? My only thought was, maybe in one of our CTE programs with sales or something like that, but I can't for the life of me think of anything. So can we just strike it? And, Dr. Smith, if you find an example of where we're doing this, we can just put it back in.
Well, I did give you two examples. One is a sports marketing class who is selling advertisements for T-shirts and for a basketball game that they play, the teachers versus the students. It's a big, huge event. They raise a lot of money every year. And yearbooks, because you can't put together a yearbook without some sponsors. And so who's going to get those sponsors? Is that a requirement of the teacher who puts together? And I thought that yearbook was a class, was a class that people can sign up for. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not a class. Maybe it's a class.
But I definitely, I don't know, that might be the best example. But I'm not sure that they have to sell ads after school to be able to pass the class. But that's what I don't know.
Okay. That was the very first example that came to my mind, because that's where I see students really actively raising money. I don't know if they make phone calls during class or if they just send out emails during class. They probably are not going to be people's businesses. They're probably finding emails and sending emails. I have never paid attention to how they get the ads. I just know that the students get the ads.
So we could leave it out for now, and then before it's finalized, bring a change. If could that be something that would it have to come back to policy before we know this, or could that be a discussion at the board level?
I think it could be a discussion at the board level. It's going on for first reading. We're not passing it. I think it should go on for first reading with that language struck.
With that language taken out?
Mary Hazel, this is Nancy. The only two I came up with was the EC program has the Cats Cafe at New Hanover High School. And so they do sell coffee and tea in the morning. The money goes back into the program. And then up at Laney, they had, I never get the name of this right, it's like occupational therapy through their EC program, and they make crafts and sell them.
And they do plants. And right. The culinary program at Laney used to have Buck Stop Cafe, where they did coffee and lunch for staff, and they do accept money.
So I think, there are some things that principals are able to have autonomy over, and some of those curriculums that are able to have autonomy over. I don't think we want to zap all of it and say that you can or cannot. We just need to make sure. And I have a high schooler who's in some of those things, and that's not what's been articulated to them. And I know that they can't call during class because they have to use their own cell phones. And I would hate for us to assume in writing a policy without having, clear, anything clear. I will be honest with you. I agree with no student may be required to participate in fundraising activity. I think that's true, unless it's a part of the curriculum and what that curriculum means of whatever they're doing, but it's got to be aligned. And that, again, that you can't place unrealistic demands on a student's time and effort. I think we say that, then we hold people accountable to that. That's what we do. That helps me as a superintendent be able to then regurgitate, this is what happened, and we let principals know this is what happens. And if we are aware of it, we have Ethics 360. If people are able, if they're doing that, and we investigate, and then we bring them back to this policy that shares and shows that. So I believe that we can, we have the right mechanisms in place so that I would hate for us to just belabor on this part, because we'll always have the what ifs.
We'll just leave it as it is with the unless it's part of the curriculum, and then let the principals manage that. Okay.
Yes, because
we're leaving it in.
I think so. I mean, I believe, because there's so many caveats to all of this, and we may be thinking one way, but it may honestly not be the way that we are thinking it. And that's where the Ethics 360 comes into play, for it to go outside of all of our departments. We have not one person, but we have a team that investigates it, and they bring it back, and then they can explain what happened. And Nancy is on the scene too.
Yeah, Nancy's way on the scene. So, okay, I'm good with that, but I wanted to make a comment. The one that we just went through, 8220, the policy that I was looking for is referenced in this policy, 8224. It's Parent Organizations Policy 5010, where it talks about fundraising. So can we just make a quick note on 8020 to reference that policy to parent organizations, because they're one of your primary donators.
So you're saying an 80-20 include a cross-reference?
Yes, to policy 5010. And 5010 is the one that's cross-referenced here in 8224.
Okay.
Thanks. And I'm good with 8224. Oh, the other thing, I just wanted to bring this up as far as that last, paragraph. Another way that we, does it matter that another way that schools raise money for themselves is in the community through volunteering at local races? Does that meet with all the requirements of what this policy is?
I don't see why it wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see why it wouldn't. I mean, I asked, I've been asking for, the schools have been raising money like this for like 10 years. And it usually goes, the check goes straight to the school system, and the treasurers break it up, appropriately within their schools.
Right. I think it's a voluntary thing, that
it is voluntary.
Might participate in a race or something to raise money and get a donation. I think the question came up during COVID when we had shut down fundraisers, and that's
right.
That's what that was what was questioned, not in general.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we are clear, because folks are earning away.
Yep.
Okay, we are moving 8224 on, and that was not amended, correct?
82. I don't have any amendments on there. No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, except
All right.
8224, the amendment we were doing on that one. Oh, no, I have nothing. Oh, paragraph, never mind. We changed it.
8230, penalties and forfeitures. Ms. Small, did you have anything here? I did not have any notes.
No changes.
The only thing I had there was that came to mind was, is this where we get the traffic light money or lottery money?
It's that, but it's not really lottery so much. Lottery comes to us through an appropriation, but this is where we might get any kind of fines, and Colin can speak to this much better than I can, from, maybe even the local police department or whatever, that if there are some fines, we get checks from them where they've collected money, or through the court system where people have paid fines. And then through the state, it comes to us through an allotment where they've collected it on a state level.
Primary way we receive funds through this is bond forfeitures. The clear proceeds of all fines and forfeitures flow to the school system. So we work through the courts to make sure the school system gets all the money it's entitled to from bond forfeitures and other vehicle forfeitures, so part of the criminal justice process.
My only thought on that was in the second sentence where it says, the superintendent is directed to aggressively seek to collect all funds that the Constitution requires be directed to the public schools. I just wondering, is that something that we aggressively seek? I mean, is that, we want that on his to-do list, key/designee? I mean, is that allocated to somebody within our school system to do that?
We get it. We go after that.
Yeah.
Again, there are things that you don't see that we do.
Okay, all right. I'm just making sure that I didn't know how aggressively you wanted to do that.
I promise you, there's a whole nother role that we play.
Okay.
We're getting all that's due to the school district.
Okay, good. Then we'll just leave that in there and aggressively seek.
And that's what we do. Our office is part of that effort, and we review all the bond forfeiture filings, to make sure that we're getting all the money that the school system should be receiving.
Okay. Yay.
Okay, 8230 on as is for first reading. Our next policy for discussion is 8300, fiscal management standards. Ms. Small.
So a couple of questions. In number 3, superintendent finance officer shall keep the board sufficiently informed regarding the budget through periodic financial statements showing the financial condition of the school system. So basically, we issue financial statements once a year. Quarterly, we give you a budget update, but we don't give you a full, financial statement except once a year. So that if you're okay that's periodic, that is our practice, and it's the practice in most school systems. So certainly you could have a budget report more often than that, but that is our current practice. So I think the wording is sufficient.
I'm good with periodic.
Okay. And then secondly, on number 4, no monies will be expended regardless of the source, including monies derived from federal, state, local, and private sources, except in accordance with the board's budget resolution or amendments to the budget resolution. The exception to that in the law is school funds. School funds do not have to be budgeted. So at some point in here, we need to say that. And it might be said somewhere else, but I think it belongs in that paragraph. So school, with the exception of school funds.
Okay, my only question was the language that was struck. Superintendent is authorized to transfer monies. Dr. Faust, you don't need that language in there. It seemed like something you might need, but
I was going to ask why it was struck. That's in our current policy, and I kind of like it, but we do that. But I thought maybe it was struck because it was in the weeds, but we
do that.
I don't know who struck it.
Yes, I'm not sure, because that happens aggressively.
And we do report those to the board. So
yes,
I think that language.
So for instance, I'll give you an example. When the board says in a meeting we're going to do X and it's going to cost X amount, you don't put a dollar amount. I have to aggressively find the money to transfer it from one place to the next to make it happen.
Guess is it might have been taken out because this is the fiscal management standards where the budget transfers are more budget and it was covered somewhere else. So that might be why it was removed, but I don't really know. I should have looked at her notes.
Well, it says in 8300 in the correlation table, second bullet, I removed information from number 4 that is instead addressed in policy 8110.
Yeah,
so
let me go back to 8110. Obviously, I did not do my homework and I apologize for that. 8110. Yes, we talk about the transfer process in 8110.
Isn't that the one that we were talking about with the board of the county commissioners and moving money around?
Yeah, I need to, sorry, I can't.
But that could be differently. So if it's a state, like for instance, ESSER funds, federal dollars.
Yeah, the budget amendments, which, so 8110C, where we go through budget amendments and transfers, they're all covered there. So that is probably why it was taken out, because it's a different topic.
Well, that's what she said. She removed it from number 4 and put it into 8110.
Okay, that's fine then.
Okay.
So I'm good with this one.
I know the correlation table is so helpful because it just explains her thought process.
I used it a lot on the purchasing one, but somehow I forgot about it when I was reviewing these, so. Use that.
Well, it got put into a weird order because with some of the other policies that when it, at least in my packet, it was put in a weird order then because some of the policies we were looking at seemed to be out of order.
Okay.
I have nothing on 8300.
I'm good. Can I proceed with federal?
Yes, 8305.
So this is a lot.
Yes, it
and
is.
I don't have any recommended changes because this is just what we're required to do. So happy to discuss it if you have questions.
The only question, I had 2 questions, and it was mainly for points of clarification. In A number 1, where it's just talking about grants that include personnel, when we get money to pay for a position through a grant, is that just their salary or does that include their benefits as well?
Salary and benefits.
Okay, so that's all included. And then back to my question before, is there someone, is there a person whose job it is to keep that spreadsheet of all of our federal grants that we have and who's responsible for administrating them?
So in terms of accounting, that's all in the finance department, and in sort of oversight of controls, it's also our we have a compliance supervisor that does that. In terms of the planning side of things, we have a federal programs director that's involved in some of the instructional ones like Title I and oversight of ESSER. And also, throughout our school system, we have directors like the EC director who are on the planning side of the federal budgeting process, but they're working hand in hand with finance to submit those in compliance with the federal programs office at DPI.
Okay. All right. And so this is just a point of clarification on D number 2, when we're talking about school nutrition services, it was, this is right, but in some of our other policies, we still say child nutrition. So I just wanted to make a note of that with Colin. That's what Amy told us, that child nutrition was moving to school nutrition. So I was just, calling that out, that this is the first policy that I've actually seen school nutrition written as school nutrition.
Yeah, but it's consistent through the policy.
Yeah.
All right.
So, but it's not consistent through all of our other policies. But that's what Amy told us at Shack meeting, that they're not calling themselves child nutrition anymore.
Ms. Craybill, we are moving to renaming. Instead of child nutrition, we're going to be calling ourselves school nutrition. So
right. That's what she said.
Process of that, and it will be consistent with policy.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's an easy change. You just Google, or search child nutrition, and you can switch them all.
And it is important to note, because sometimes it's a little bit confusing, that all federal, everything in the school nutrition fund now, I guess I need to change it on the budget too, is considered federal money because of the reimbursement. So the entire fund is audited as if it's a federal grant.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to make sure that we called it the right thing, since it was all federal money. We don't want to mess up.
Right. Mary Hazel, on page 2, under 3, fourth paragraph where it talks about purchasing records, do we need to include something about justification based on our training that we have?
Yeah, so we're looking, Ashley speaking behind me, I don't know if you can hear her, on page 2 of 6, section 3 procurement. They have really stressed with ESSER funds how important that 4th paragraph is in terms of purchasing records. They're expecting much more documentation than federal programs have in the past with ESSER funds. I think we can define that in procedure for them in terms of what sufficiently maintained means, but there's a whole lot more that's being expected, and we were trained on that in the last 2 weeks. But the language isn't quite as strong as the new regulations say, but I don't know if that's just an interpretation of how, I think there's some extra requirements in ESSER over and above what might be in uniform guidance. So we're working in compliance with all that, but I just wanted to point out to you, we'd have to go back and figure out if we needed to change any legal references, but we do know that they're expecting much more than they ever have.
I think that it says sufficiently maintained, and so for particular type of funds, the requirement for documentation is greater, then that's what's sufficient for those funds. That's what I would interpret it.
Okay, thank you. We just wanted to make sure. But yeah, it's amazing how much work is involved in managing the federal funds.
Ms. Crable, did you have anything else?
No, that was except that my eyeballs rolling back.
Okay, let's go ahead and move policy 8305 on for first reading as is. Our next policy is our annual independent audit policy 8310. Ms. Small.
I do not have any recommendations. This is our current process.
I'm good.
8310 on for first reading.
Do we need to have anything about soliciting bids, like since depositories, we have to do it every 5 years? So we need or no?
Ashley,
depositories 8320.
Wait a minute, 8310. We're back there.
So Ashley was just asking about when we get to depositories, we're going to talk about how often we have to do a bid. We have typically tried to do audit bids, every 3 to 5 years. And with COVID and with the ERP project, we pushed that a bit, but we're going to be doing a bid this year. And so that is not addressed in this policy. It is addressed in the depository policy. So I just didn't know if the board had a preference on how often we do audit bids.
If that's something we normally do, then I think we should put it in our policy.
So I was, and I guess it's okay to talk about both policies together. For the banks, that is not something we've typically done because of, a bank change is pretty significant for us. But the recommended policy for banks is every 3 years, and I was going to say 5. But for audit, yeah, I think for both, if they could be 5, we would be happy with that, but it's the board's decision. The contracts come to you annually. This is just about the bids.
I'm good with that, Nelson, with on 8310, inserting the language that said solicit bids every 5 years.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that language for both. 5 years is good.
Okay.
Colin, can you note that change?
Yep, so we're inserting language in 8310 that says that we'll solicit bids every 5 years for auditor.
And it certainly could be done more often than that, but
At least
that would
there
be
is.
the minimum.
And that meets the law, I'm
There
assuming.
is no legal requirement for
Okay,
professional services. It's just
Okay.
good practice.
so tell me why we have a cross-reference on this policy that says professional employees demotion and dismissal policy. Why do we have that cross-referenced and the classified ones?
No idea. I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, that one just seemed a little bit out of place.
I'll remove those cross-references.
Okay, thanks.
There's something in paragraph 2 about any employee who fails to cooperate may be subject to disciplinary action up to and including dismissal, and on and on and on. That might be why.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I remember reading that going, oh, that's,
Yeah.
don't be messing with the audit. Okay, then go ahead and leave those in. It just struck me as weird, but
Presentation to the board within 45 days, is that, are we
good with 8310 and 8320?
hold on, Ashley's making a comment.
She was asking about the 45 days, but I actually think that's a state requirement. So we try to do it as soon as we can, but I'm fine with the 45 days. We will bring it to you as soon as it's ready.
Right.
So the latest it would come was January. In most years we try to do December. I can't make promises this year. It might be January. So, but we will meet all the deadlines of the LGC.
Okay, let's move on to policy 8325.
Okay, so 8310, we're moving on with an amendment to add bids, and then 8320, we're moving on to
We
change
still need to talk
every.
about 8320. So we talked about
Yes.
the bid piece, but there's more.
Right. Okay, go ahead.
First of all, we've never had this policy, and I want to talk to you a little bit about school accounts. So in North Carolina, there's a certain list of banks that is allowable for us to use that the local government commission approves. We have generally let our schools, we have to approve it, in our office, but we let them choose the allowable bank that's closest to them, so they don't have to drive so far to go to the bank when they make their daily deposits and all that. So this is saying that we'll also bid these every 3 years. I think it's important for an official, for like the I can't think of the right word for it, but the right word, official deposit, the school system bank account. There's a word for it. I just can't think of what it is. But I don't think every school needs to go through this process. So, because it says will designate as official depositories of the school system one or more banks. So that might exclude school by the nature of the language. That's really a question for Colin, but I was worried it meant schools, and I didn't want it to. So we still approve the school bank accounts, but so I guess they're technically official depositories of that school, but what do you, I could read 443 and we could come back to that. But
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that statute, to be honest with you.
Can I check that? We'll sort of maybe approve it for now and just let me double check that language before we're done.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Let's put Nancy on that. She is super sleuth.
Okay, but we can move on for now while I look.
These are all yours, though.
Oh, well, that's true. Okay, well, it's very
Okay.
short. So under official depository list, this is under 444, each board of education designate as the official depository of the school system, one or more banks. I mean, this exact language. It'll be unlawful for any monies belonging to a LEA or an individual school to be deposited into a bank that is not on this list. So we switched to my words instead of the law there for a minute. But what I'm asking is that we separate the bid from the official depository list. So I don't really want to bid school banks every 5 years. I just want to bid the central one. So their accounts are part of this, you have to approve it, but I just don't think we should have the bid requirement. Because it's very little amount of money that's there. And, we have probably 10 or 15 different banks that we use across the system.
I mean, I read it to say the school system, right? Not schools, individual schools.
It says all money of the school system has to be on an official depository. Like, we have to approve it. I just only want to bid the system account. The central account, maybe that's what we call it.
Right.
The central depository should be bid, not every bank account. So we could bring every bank account for approval to you at that same time. I just don't think we should have to bid it, but that is, it's the board's preference there. Well, we could all make schools use the same bank we use. It just might be inconvenient.
Does the school system use the state employees credit union?
No.
Okay.
The school encourages state employees credit union in terms of like the summer cash program. That's one of the things that we do, but it's not and not
Who's our
even
bank?
schools would be eligible to use that. Yeah.
Who is our bank? Who do we bank with?
Say again.
Said who is our bank?
Currently it's Wells Fargo, as well
Okay.
as lots of other smaller banks at schools.
Okay. Yeah.
Wells Fargo is our central depository.
Is our central depository. Okay.
And that's the one we should bid. So if we could just maybe add the language, maybe solicit bids for the central depository every 3 years.
Yeah, that makes, I understand. Yeah.
And then separate about the board, the board of the finance. Basically, I need to approve the bank schools use.
Right.
So did you say you wanted that to be every 5 years, Mary Hazel, or?
Yes, I
leave it
did.
at
I
every
did.
3?
I'm reading
Okay.
3 and wanting 5. So thank you
Okay.
for that.
Okay.
I'm struggling. I apologize.
That's all right. It's all right.
So change it to every 5 years.
And just say, well, that
Yeah.
the board will solicit bids for central depository every 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Individual schools, central depositories have to be approved by the school finance officer.
yes. In compliance with all the rest of that. Yes.
Mary Hazel in there, this is Nancy. Savings and loan associations or trust companies, have we ever done that?
No. And I'd have to look at the list of the LGC, but we have not. We just, I mean, they just haven't in the past, but they're by nature a little riskier. So.
Okay, so are we good with those policies as amended, 8310 and 8320?
Yes.
All right, moving on to policy 8325, daily deposits.
I think you skipped 30. Oh, no, we didn't. I'm sorry. I skipped it. 8325. You're right. This is law. And I don't think the current law requires at the end of the week. It's just 250 daily or the last business day of the month. So that change is the current law.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I have 2 questions. Well, one was the comment again about the finance officer. In previous places, we've called it the school finance financial officer. So do we want to insert the word school there?
Where is it?
So it's in the second paragraph, first line.
I think you should. Mhm.
So just make that clear. And then, so here's a question I had for just best practices, where in that same sentences, it says the school officer, financial officer provides sufficient segregation of duties to ensure that the individual making a deposit is not the same individual who collects, prepares, and records the deposit. So if I'm understanding the role of the school treasurer, they take in all the money that people give them. They prepare the deposits and they take the money to the bank. So, but this is saying that is not what you want them to do.
In most cases, money is not collected initially from them. It's collected by people throughout the building, and then it's brought to them for consolidation and deposit. So we generally prefer it's two people at the school. But some
what about
schools are
like
so
parking
small
passes?
And that says unless not feasible in a particular circumstances. So we do have some small schools where that's not feasible, but we have procedures in place. So I mean, you could leave out those details, but they do need to follow the procedures that we,
Yeah, and I don't want to dictate your best practices, but I'm just thinking, like, if a kid is directed to the school treasurer to pay for their parking pass, or to pay for a lost badge, or fines. So they go and they pay that to the treasurer. So the treasurer would be collecting that, receipting that, depositing that.
Right. And then Nancy's going to be auditing that. So
and Nancy's going to be auditing
situations where it's not feasible for every teacher in the school to sell, parking passes. But we try to have compensating controls to make sure that's secure. So if you want this part rewritten, we could, but I thought that first phrase was going to give us the flexibility we needed.
Well, so I think you're right for the average person, but who's to say that a principal says this is not feasible, so therefore we're not going to do it, when in fact it really could be feasible. It's just a pain in the butt.
Well, we give them, like I said, there's a whole manual with very detailed procedures that we require they follow that are not in policy to support this. So they don't have flexibility over that. Nancy, help me out here.
That's okay. I do look for this and I do make recommendation because it isn't the best practice that we have at least two people involved. So if I'm finding that this treasurer is making a lot, then we just get somebody else in the building to start receiving it first. And that hasn't been a problem. There's usually somebody else to be able to receive that.
And I mean, there are times, so there will be times where the data manager, whomever the financial person, will have to receipt it. That just happens. However, Nancy does have comments, and there's an audit form that we use, again, that you don't get to see. And we have conversations with individuals when they're in violation.
Right.
And so there's a process behind that. So I don't see any of this as honestly an issue because our systems are really tight. And you have to understand that we get we're audited, and we just got a national award this year. So
well,
I think we're
and I'm very, very aware of the thoroughness of Nancy Braswell. I mean, her reputation precedes her on the thoroughness of her paperwork, and I have been involved in some of that thoroughness on occasion, and appreciate that. So yes, I was just going on experience that I had, with my kid, but again, that was 8 years ago. So, all right. So
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, the other thing that really isn't addressed here, I don't know if it has to be because, this is talking about deposits, but we have, through COVID, made every school, before it was optional, but every school has the opportunity to take online payments. And, we avoid all this risk with that process. And so it's not addressed here because it's not, it's not a deposit, but we do, as much as possible, encourage online payments so that we don't have the risk of loss of cash in the building.
So do we want to put that in policy that we do that? Because I mean, that's the wave of the future. Everybody wants to pay, and a parent wants to be able to pay from their living room, for, cafeteria account. That's different, but that they want to be able to pay from home and not come into the school building. So is this something, is now the time that we consider just writing that in, that those payments are acceptable?
Well, I mean, we try, every school has it on their website. It's definitely something that we do. It doesn't relate to this issue of daily deposits. Could it be somewhere else in the finance policies? We could look at that.
Okay.
But it doesn't really fit with this one.
Okay.
I brought it up because it means that we don't have the deposit numbers that we had in the past.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to figure out where we put that.
Okay.
In the middle of the paragraph where it says, however, if the amount on hand is less than $250, daily deposits are encouraged but not required. And that 250 is in red and underlined. So I didn't know if that was something that we needed to discuss and I didn't see it in her notes on the correlation table.
I don't know why it's red, but it's in law.
Okay. All right.
We'd love it to go up a little bit, but it is what it is.
Okay.
I thought it was
with it.
I thought it was required, so I was surprised to see the word encouraged.
No, that's less than 250 encouraged. But we don't require them to go to the bank every day if they've got $10, because it's just not feasible. There was some discussion legislatively about increasing that a couple of years ago, but it didn't happen.
So just so I'm clear, the only change is inserting school in front of finance officer in the second paragraph?
Yes.
There's 3 places it is. It's second paragraph, third paragraph, first line, and then the last line of the first paragraph.
Yeah.
But is that different? The one that's in the third paragraph, are they still referring to you? In the third one, it says the school finance officer may at any time audit the accounts, which we do. Monthly, Nancy's in there. Is that one still?
That's the law. So it's more about directing it to be audited than actually doing the work. So you could say, or designate if you wanted, but it is, that language is from the law.
Got it.
All right, are we good with those as amended? If we are, we will move on to policy 8330, signatures.
This is also a legal requirement. The language is a little outdated. We don't actually have a facsimile signature machine anymore. The computer takes the place of that. It used to actually be a piece of hardware, but the language from the law, we have thought it would be important to continue to include that in the policy. So Colin, do you agree?
This is still the way the statute reads.
Yep.
Should we add anything?
All right, then, Ms. Crable, do you have
Wait a
anything?
minute, hold on. Ashley's making a comment, Nelson.
She is saying she's asking about DocuSign and some of the ways that people approve, electronic signatures, not on checks, but on other things. And so this particular policy is talking about pre-audit on contracts and purchase orders. Let's see. And I don't think it's it's about my signature on those things.
Yep. I agree. It wouldn't apply to this wouldn't apply to DocuSign on a teacher's contract or anything like that. This is about the signing of checks or pre-auditing of contracts.
Right. But if somebody else signs it that way on their signature, we're okay with that. And we have that in our procedures in terms of what's allowable.
Right.
Okay. But my signature is either real or, built into the system. An example of purchase order. So I think we're good. But that's a great question.
Okay, anybody else have anything on this?
Nope.
Policy 8340, insurance, and I believe that this will be our last policy since we still have to make our recommendations and close out. I definitely don't want to go over time with. the
Nelson,
board
what
meetings.
time do you have? I have 11, we got 20 minutes.
I think the limited claim settlement might take more than 20 minutes.
Okay. All right.
I'm gonna mention here, I don't know how it got missed, but at the end of our last policy meeting, we had 3 purchasing policies that Deborah and I updated and we sent, but I think just because it was so long ago, it was a month ago, they didn't make it on this list. So I would ask that when we bring back the rest of the finance policies, we also bring back the 3 pending purchasing policies. Just throwing that out there. But
Could you list those for us, Mary Hazel?
Say again?
Would you list those for us so
Yes.
so
So
Kim
it
can
is,
capture those?
6430. We discussed them last time, but we just.
Yeah, I remember.
6430, 6450, and 6510.
Okay, thanks.
So they had sort of, I had dropped the ball the month before, and you know, we're going to eventually get to these 3. They're just kind of cursed, but we're going to get to them next time. So,
okay.
On the insurance, I think that I'm fine with the first paragraph. The second paragraph is not something we do. The board does not require school social workers to increase their private automobile liability coverage, and on and on and on. So that might be something that happens in other counties, but that does not happen here. So I just didn't know if we want to have discussion of that, Dr. Faust. We have never required them to transport students.
So those in other districts, and I'll say, I can say the ones that I've worked, those are actually technically the only people who could put kids in their vehicles. And we highly discouraged anyone else from putting individuals in their vehicle. And so, yes, they would have different limits to their auto policy because that's what they were doing. Again, if that's not policy here, then we would have to have a different conversation.
Yeah, because I thought our policy was, no school employee transports a kid, at all, even though I'm fairly certain that does happen from time to time. But
what they do now, as I understand it, if they have to transport in a like in a cab or something, they will ride with the student, but we don't have them put them in their personal vehicle. So this is the proper way to do it if that is something our system required. We just haven't in the past, so I just didn't know. We haven't allowed in the past.
Is our policy currently that no school employee? I thought there was some sort of exemption for social workers, but I could be wrong.
And I maybe we need Julie for this, but I was not aware of it. I didn't think it was allowed. So you may want to hold this.
I remember having a conversation when we were doing policies, and it was with Eddie and Julie, and we were talking about the taxis. That's been some months ago. I can't remember which policy it was and who was the owner of that policy.
Well, I read this as it provides an option for that other policy. So it leaves you open the possibility of changing that policy, but doesn't require you one way or another. It's just saying if that's the direction you go.
That's true.
Well, it does say policy 6330, insurance for student transportation services, but this isn't a service.
And it's definitely not something we require. It might be something we occasionally allow for, but even there, I'm not 100% sure. So, I don't think it hurts us passing it, because if we do it, we do it. If we don't do it, we don't do it. Or we could just wait for Ms. Farnham and talk about this next month.
Yeah, you're holding
That's probably the best
insurance policy anyway. So
yeah, and also too, when I don't like a policy that says if the board requires. We need to say the board allows or the board doesn't allow, or the board allows with this caveat, not if we decide, because that's just way out there.
Because I definitely agree. If we allow, this is important language, and this process needs to be budgeted. This is it's the only way that we should do it if we allow it.
So let's just hold, why don't we just hold this one until Julie gets back?
All right, then. Yeah, respectful of everybody's time, I'm going to try to get us out of here about 10 minutes early. So we will finish the rest of these policies in our December board meeting. I'm sorry, our December policy committee meeting.
With the 3 that she added.
Yes.
With the 364, yeah, those 3.
Yes. So no action was taken on policies 7360 or 8340 today. And at this time, I will entertain a motion to move forward for first reading, as is policies 3105.
Wait a minute, 30, what, is that what's 3105? Is that the homeschool?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
7100.
Yep.
8210.
You missed 8,000.
8224. I'm not going in order.
Oh, can you go in order? I just look at the list. I have them in order, so we're not all jumping around.
I didn't write. I didn't write them down in order. I just wrote them down as what's going on for first reading as is and what's going on as amended.
All right, hold on, because all right, go ahead, because I have them. I'm going in order, and I have them marked by color. So I'm gonna have to find what you're saying as you go out of order to make sure that you captured it the same way I did. All right, so start with the 8,000s.
Okay, policy 8,000.
It as presented, green.
Yep. Then I had 8210.
Yep.
And I had 8224.
No, that has an amendment.
Okay. 8230.
8230. Yes.
8300.
Yes.
8330.
How about 8305?
8305. 8310 and 8330.
8310 has some amendments.
Oh, that's right. Okay. 8310 and 8330.
Yes.
Okay. And is there a motion to pass those policies as amended or as is?
Presented? Yes, I motion.
Second, Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes. And now I will entertain a motion to pass the policies as amended, policy 8100.
Keep going. Yeah, 8100. Yep.
8110.
Yep.
8220.
Yep.
8224.
82. Yep.
8310.
Yep.
8320.
Yep.
And 8325.
Yes.
Is there a motion?
Yes. I move to.
I'll second. Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Yes.
I also vote yes.
And did you say that we are keeping 7360/8225?
So,
and
Colin, correct me if I'm wrong here. We're not taking action. We don't need to vote to say we're not doing anything. Is that correct?
Right.
We're just.
Yep.
But we have been, Nelson, because just for clarity, so that we can, and tracking purposes, that we know.
I know we have been, but I think it creates confusion. I don't understand the vote to take no action.
I'm not saying a vote to take no action. I'm just saying I want it put in the minutes that we are not taking any action on 2 things that we reviewed, so that we're clear on that. That's all I'm saying. We don't have to vote to do nothing, but I don't want anything getting lost in the pages.
Yeah, well, I would assume that it would be in our minutes, but I mean, we can definitely vote on it.
Whatever you want to do, I don't care.
Yeah,
I think it can be, I think it's so long as it's reflected in the minutes, hopefully that'll be clarity.
Right,
enough.
that's all I'm asking is it's reflected in the minutes that we reviewed 2 policies and they are staying in policy.
Clarification about 8305, was that on the list?
Yes, for going forward as presented.
I just missed that one. Thank you.
Okay, before we go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn, I just would like to say to every veteran on the call and every veteran who tuned into the meeting, happy Veterans Day. Thank you very much for your service. It's greatly appreciated. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And I will second. Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. We are adjourned with our thanks to our staff, and we will see you all tonight.
And thanks to Ms. Chapman representing the principals.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ms. Chapman. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Thank you.